She told me one day I'd forget her, like a passing chapter in my life. But the truth is, some people write themselves so deeply into your heart, forgetting them isn't even an option. I never expected to notice her the way I did. She was just supposed to be my friend's mom, someone I'd seen in passing a few times, polite enough, kind enough, always offering snacks or asking how school was going back in the day. Nothing unusual about that. But the evening I walked into their house after months away, something shifted. The first thing that struck me wasn't her words, it was the light. The kitchen was washed in the soft glow of late afternoon sun, golden and warm, streaming across the wooden counters. And there she was, standing by the stove, sleeves rolled to her elbows, a loose blouse tucked casually at her waist. She moved with this kind of unhurried grace, like every motion was intentional. "Hi, you must be hungry," she said, her voice carrying that calm steadiness that made even the simplest words feel like they carried weight. She turned, smiling, and in that moment I noticed how her smile wasn't the quick, polite kind people give out of habit. No, it lingered, as though she meant it. I tried to play it cool, answering with some awkward comment about how long it had been since I'd visited. But truthfully, I was distracted. Noticing things I shouldn't be noticing. The faint scent of something floral when she brushed past me to set a plate down. The way her eyes, soft brown, flecked with warmth, held mine just long enough before darting away. She wasn't trying. That was the thing. She wasn't trying to be noticed. Everything about her presence was effortless. And maybe that's why I couldn't stop noticing. While my friend was upstairs grabbing something, it was just the two of us in the kitchen. She poured tea, and I caught myself watching the small details. The way her fingers curled delicately around the handle, the slight arch of her wrist, the faint shadow of a smile tugging at her lips when she realized I was quiet. "You've grown," she said, glancing at me briefly. "Older somehow." It was such a simple statement, but it landed heavier than it should have. Maybe it was the way she said it, almost like she wasn't talking about height or age, but something else. Something she noticed in me that I wasn't used to people seeing. I smiled back, a little unsure, and shrugged. "Guess time does that." She gave a soft laugh, a low, almost private sound, and returned to what she was doing. But the air between us had shifted. There was nothing inappropriate in that moment. No obvious line being crossed. But inside me, a realization had taken root: she wasn't just someone's mom. She was a woman with a presence that filled the room, with a quiet confidence that demanded attention without asking for it. And I couldn't ignore it. Later, when my friend came back down, everything slipped back into the normal rhythm. Jokes, conversation, the kind of casual energy you expect between friends. She stayed in the background, tidying up, offering snacks, being the gracious host she always was. But I caught her glancing once, quick and fleeting, like she was aware I had seen her differently. And maybe she had seen me differently too. I left that night with something unsettled in my chest. A thought I tried to push away, but couldn't. Why does she feel unforgettable, when she was never supposed to be anything more than a passing presence in my life? That was the first spark. Quiet, unnoticed by anyone else. But it was enough to start a fire I wasn't ready for, and maybe she wasn't either. It's strange how the smallest moments carry the most weight. That evening, it wasn't some grand event or dramatic scene. It was the simple fact that my friend had stepped out for a while, leaving me in the kitchen with her. Just her and me, the faint clink of dishes between us, and the silence that felt thicker than it should have. She was drying glasses with a towel, humming quietly to herself, when she looked up and caught me watching. Not in an obvious way. I was trying to play it off, like I was just resting my eyes on nothing in particular. But the truth was, I had been watching. Noticing the way the soft light curved across her cheekbones, how the lines near her eyes only made her beauty more graceful, not less. "You don't have to just stand there," she said, smiling faintly. "Here, help me with these." She handed me a stack of plates, her fingers brushing against mine for just a second too long. That tiny contact sent a ripple through me, sharper than it should have been. She didn't flinch, didn't act like it was anything at all. But the way her gaze flickered told me she felt something too. I set the plates down carefully, maybe more carefully than necessary, just to steady myself. "I don't mind helping," I said, trying to sound casual. "That's good," she replied, her tone light but her eyes softer now. "Not many people your age would bother." There was a compliment in her words, but also a distance, like she was reminding herself I wasn't her equal. Not really. I was younger. I was supposed to belong to a different world than hers. And yet, in that kitchen, I didn't feel like a boy. I felt seen. For a while, we worked side by side in silence. The sound of water running, the clink of silverware, the faint scrape of a chair leg against the tiled floor. Every sound seemed louder because of how aware I was of her presence next to me. Then came another moment, so small, but impossible to forget. I reached across her for a dish towel, and she shifted at the same time. My hand grazed her wrist, warm and delicate under my touch. For a second, either of us moved. My heart stuttered, and I swear I felt her pulse quicken too, before she gently pulled her hand away. "Careful," she said softly, her voice lower now, almost unsteady. "Sorry," I murmured, though I wasn't. Not really. The space between us felt different after that. Charged, even though we kept moving like nothing had happened. She cracked a small joke about me not knowing how to stack dishes properly. I laughed, maybe a little too much, just to keep the air light. But beneath that laughter, there was tension neither of us named. When the last dish was put away, she leaned against the counter, exhaling like she was glad the task was done. Her hand rested on the counter's edge, and I noticed how close it was to mine. Just inches away. I thought about closing that distance, just resting my hand over hers, nothing more. But I didn't. Instead, I glanced at her, and she glanced back. That shared look lasted only a heartbeat before she straightened and stepped back, smoothing the front of her blouse as if to reset herself. "Thank you," she said, her tone warm again but carefully measured. "That was helpful." I nodded, pretending the moment was nothing. Pretending I wasn't still replaying the brush of her wrist in my mind. Later, when my friend returned, everything snapped back to normal. The easy rhythm of banter, the comfort of friendship. But somewhere beneath all of that, something had changed. She and I both knew it, even if either of us would admit it yet. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about her hand brushing mine. It was such a small thing. But sometimes, small things are what change everything. It happened late one evening, when the house was unusually quiet. My friend had gone out to meet someone, leaving me behind to wait. I didn't mind, it gave me time to finish up some reading in the living room. But what I hadn't expected was for her to join me. She walked in carrying 2 mugs of tea, the steam curling upward into the dimly lit room. "I thought you might want something warm," she said, setting one gently on the table in front of me. I looked up, surprised. "Thank you." She sat across from me, settling into the armchair with a kind of effortless poise. The lamp beside her cast a soft glow on her face, highlighting the faint traces of time, the kind that made her seem even more real, more human. At first, our conversation was simple. Weather. Work. The kind of small talk that fills empty spaces. But then, almost without warning, it shifted. She asked me about my plans, about what I wanted to do in life. I shrugged, offering a half-serious answer about figuring things out as I went. Her smile faded into something more thoughtful. "That's good," she said. "You have time. You can afford to make mistakes." I tilted my head, curious. "Didn't you ever feel like that? When you were younger?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She leaned back, her fingers curling around her mug as if drawing warmth from it. "Yes," she admitted after a pause. "I had dreams. Things I thought I'd do. Places I thought I'd see. But life..." Her voice trailed off, and she gave a small, almost self-mocking laugh. "Life doesn't always go the way you expect." Something in her tone pulled at me. Not regret exactly, but a quiet ache. I found myself leaning forward, elbows resting on my knees. "What did you want?" I asked gently. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a moment, I thought she might dismiss the question. But then she sighed, her shoulders softening. I wanted to travel. I wanted to paint. I wanted to live without worrying about what people thought of me. But somewhere along the way, I stopped chasing those things. The room felt still, as though her words had hushed everything else. I didn't know what to say at first. I only knew I wanted to keep her talking, to let her unfold pieces of herself that no one else seemed to see. You still can, I said quietly. It's not too late. She smiled then, but it was a fragile smile, touched with disbelief. You're kind, she murmured, shaking her head. But it's different for me now. Her hand brushed against her temple, tucking back a loose strand of hair. It was such a small, human gesture, but in that moment it struck me how rarely she let herself appear vulnerable. You don't have to pretend with me, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. She looked at me sharply, almost as if testing whether I meant it. And then her gaze softened. You remind me of who I used to be, she whispered. That line stayed with me, heavy and delicate all at once. I couldn't respond right away. Instead, I just held her eyes, letting the silence stretch between us. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was alive, charged with something unspoken. Finally, she broke it, standing up a little too quickly. It's late, she said, setting her empty mug down. You should get some rest. But even as she turned away, I caught it, the flicker of hesitation in her step, the way her hand lingered on the back of the chair as though she wasn't ready to leave. That night, as I lay awake, I realized what had changed. She wasn't just my friend's mom anymore. She was a woman with untold stories, with a life full of dreams and disappointments, and somehow, she had chosen to share them with me. And I couldn't stop wondering why. It's always the unexpected moments that stay with you. Not the planned ones, not the conversations you rehearse in your head, but the small accidents you never see coming. That was the night everything shifted for me, quietly, almost invisibly. I was walking down the hallway toward the kitchen when it happened. The lights were dim, only a faint glow spilling in from the living room. She turned the corner at the same time I did, carrying a basket of folded laundry against her hip. The space was narrow, just wide enough for one person to pass comfortably. We both stopped, hesitating, then tried to move at the same time. My shoulder brushed hers, and in that instant, the basket tipped slightly. I reached out automatically, steadying it with one hand while the other caught her arm. Her skin was warm beneath my fingers, softer than I expected, and for a moment, longer than polite, either of us moved. She looked up at me, surprised, but her eyes didn't harden. If anything, they softened, just for a heartbeat. Sorry, I said quickly, though my voice came out lower than I intended. It's fine, she murmured. But her voice wavered on that last word, betraying the steadiness she was trying to keep. I let go of her arm, but the impression of her lingered, burning against my palm. She shifted past me, careful not to meet my eyes, and I could almost feel the tension she was carrying in her silence. Later that evening, another moment arrived, as if fate hadn't made its point clear enough. She was reaching for something on the top shelf in the pantry, an old jar tucked too far back. I was nearby and instinctively stepped forward. Here, let me. Before she could protest, I reached up and grabbed it easily, handing it down to her. But when she took it, our hands overlapped again. This time, neither of us moved right away. Her fingers rested against mine, light but unmistakable, as if she wasn't ready to let go. The air between us felt charged, like the whole room was holding its breath. She finally pulled the jar to her chest, stepping back with a small, nervous laugh. Thank you, she said softly. I nodded, but inside, everything was restless. My heart was racing, my thoughts looping back to the feel of her hand. As she turned away, I noticed her pause at the counter, her back to me. She set the jar down, but instead of moving on, she leaned forward slightly, bracing herself with both hands. Almost like she needed a second to gather herself. Are you okay? I asked, keeping my voice gentle. Yes, she answered quickly, too quickly. Then, softer. I just need to remind myself where the lines are. Her words weren't for me, not really. They were for herself. But hearing them stung in a way I couldn't explain. Lines. Boundaries. She was reminding herself that she was supposed to be untouchable to me. But the truth was, those small moments, the brush in the hallway, the warmth of her hand, had already erased the idea of distance. At least for me. I wanted to tell her then, to reassure her that I wasn't confused, that I knew what I felt. But instead, I stayed quiet, letting her have the space she seemed to need. Still, that night when I left the house, my hand twitched at my side, aching with the memory of hers. It wasn't a kiss, it wasn't anything reckless or loud. It was just touch, small, accidental, but undeniable. And somehow, that was enough to change everything. The rain had started that evening, soft at first, then steady. It drummed against the windows, filling the silence with a rhythm that seemed louder than either of us wanted to admit. My friend had gone upstairs, leaving me and her alone again in the living room. She sat by the window, arms folded, staring out into the night. The glow of the lamp outlined her profile, strong yet fragile, like a painting you couldn't look away from. Something about the way her shoulders were drawn tight told me she was holding back more than words. I hesitated before speaking. You look far away. Her lips curved into a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Just thinking. About what? I asked softly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned back in the chair, her fingers tracing the rim of her sleeve. Finally, she exhaled, a sound that carried years inside it. About how unfair time can be. How it gives and takes without asking. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, drawn to her honesty. You make it sound like time has already taken too much from you. Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp for a second, then softened. Maybe it has. Or maybe I've given it away too easily. She looked away again, her voice quieter now. And maybe that's why I need to stop this before it goes any further. The words cut deeper than I expected. Stop what? I asked, even though I knew. Her gaze locked on me then, steady but full of conflict. This. Whatever this is between us. You're young. You'll move on. Someday you'll look back and barely remember me. I felt something in my chest tighten, almost painfully. I shook my head. You really think I could forget you that easily? She laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. That's how it works. People come and go. Feelings fade. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. Not this. Not you. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the sound of rain tapping the glass. She looked at me as though searching for cracks in my words, testing if I meant them. Her arms folded tighter across her chest, as though bracing against something she didn't want to feel. You don't understand, she whispered. People will talk. They'll judge. I can't risk that. I wanted to reach for her, to take her hand, but I forced myself to stay still. Maybe they would. But why does their opinion matter more than what's real between us? Her lips parted, then closed again. I could see the battle inside her, want against fear, longing against the rules she'd built around her life. Finally, she shook her head, her voice breaking slightly. Because I've spent too many years caring what people think. I can't just unlearn it overnight. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Then don't unlearn it overnight. Just don't shut me out. Don't pretend this is nothing when we both know it isn't. Her eyes glistened, and she turned away quickly, wiping at them with the back of her hand as though she could erase the proof of her struggle. You'll forget me, she said again, firmer this time, as if repeating it could make it true. I leaned back, letting out a shaky breath. Not a chance? I whispered. The rain pressed harder against the glass, almost like it was echoing the storm inside us. Neither of us spoke after that. She sat with her arms folded tight, and I sat with my fists clenched at my sides, both of us trapped in the space between what we wanted and what we feared. And yet, even in that silence, I knew the truth. She didn't really want me to forget her. She was just terrified that I never would. The storm hadn't stopped. By the time evening settled in, the world outside was drenched, the sound of rain filling every corner of the house. My friend had left for the night, promising to be back late, which left the two of us alone. The quiet was different this time, not awkward, not empty. It was heavy, pulsing with everything left unsaid. She was in the living room, tidying up the books stacked on the coffee table. I watched her from the couch, pretending to scroll through my phone but really just stealing glances. Every movement she made seemed deliberate, like she was fighting to stay in control. Finally, I set the phone aside. You don't have to keep busy, you know. She paused, her hand resting on a book. And what would you have me do instead? Her voice was calm, but her back was still to me. Sit. Talk to me. Slowly she turned, her eyes searching mine. For a moment she didn't move. Then, with a sigh, she crossed the room and sat on the edge of the couch, leaving just enough space between us to remind herself of the distance she wanted to keep. The silence stretched until I couldn't stand it. You keep saying I'll forget you. But you never ask if I want to. Her lips parted slightly, surprise flickering in her eyes. She looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. You're young, she whispered. You should be living your life, not wasting your time here with me. I shook my head. You're not a waste of time. Her eyes lifted, sharp, almost pleading. Don't say things like that. Why not? It's the truth. Her breath caught, and she looked away again. The rain outside seemed to grow louder, filling the silence she left behind. Finally she said, You don't understand what this would mean. For me. For you. People wouldn't see it as something simple. I don't care what they see, I said quietly, leaning closer. Her hands trembled slightly, fingers twisting together. She exhaled shakily, then finally let the words slip. Do you think it's easy for me? Pretending I don't notice? Pretending I don't feel anything when you look at me like that? My chest tightened. So you do feel it. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if wishing she could take the words back. I shouldn't. But yes. I do. I couldn't hold back anymore. My hand moved instinctively, brushing against hers where they rested on her lap. She didn't pull away. Her fingers hesitated, then slowly, carefully, curled into mine. The touch was small, but it shattered everything. Her breathing quickened, and when she finally looked at me, her eyes were unguarded, raw with emotion. This is wrong, she whispered, though her hand stayed in mine. Then why does it feel right? I asked softly. Her lips trembled, like she wanted to answer but couldn't. I raised my other hand, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. My thumb grazed her cheek, and she closed her eyes, leaning just slightly into the touch. For a moment, the world narrowed to just that, her breath against mine, the storm outside, the way her hand tightened around mine like she was afraid to let go. I leaned in, slowly, giving her the chance to move away. Our lips hovered just a breath apart. She inhaled sharply, and for one suspended second, it felt inevitable. But then she turned her face, breaking the moment. My lips brushed the edge of her cheek instead, the gentlest of touches, and she pulled back. I can't, she whispered, her voice trembling. Not yet. I nodded, though my heart ached with the nearness of what almost happened. I didn't press, didn't push. Instead, I let her hand rest in mine a little longer, letting her feel the promise in my silence. That night, I realized we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. And though she pulled away, she also admitted the truth. I wasn't the only one who felt it. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and golden after the night of storm. The house felt different, quiet, steady, as though even the air had taken a deep breath and settled. I woke early, restless from the weight of what had almost happened the night before. My heart still carried the imprint of her hand in mine, the near touch of her lips, the way her voice trembled when she admitted what she'd been trying to deny. I found her in the kitchen, already dressed, her hair tied back loosely, a cup of tea warming her hands. She looked up when I entered, her eyes holding mine for a second too long before she glanced down, hiding behind the steam of her cup. "Morning," I said softly. "Morning," she replied, her voice careful, as if the wrong word might break whatever fragile peace lay between us. I sat across from her, watching the way her fingers curled around the cup. The silence was no longer awkward, it was loaded, brimming with everything left to say. Finally, I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. "About last night." She froze, the cup halfway to her lips. "Don't," she whispered quickly. "If we talk about it, it'll only make it harder." I shook my head. "It's already hard. Pretending nothing's there, that's harder than anything else." Her eyes lifted then, and there was no shield left. They were soft, uncertain, but glistening with something more, fear, yes, but also longing. She set the cup down, her hands trembling slightly. "You'll move on," she said, repeating the line that had haunted me since the first time she said it. "You'll meet someone your own age. You'll forget this, forget me." I leaned closer, my voice steady. "I told you already?" "Not a chance." Her lips parted, and I saw her fighting tears she didn't want to show. "You don't understand what you're saying. I've lived more years than you. I carry mistakes, scars, responsibilities you don't even know about." I reached across the table, gently covering her hand with mine. She tensed at first, then slowly relaxed, letting my warmth steady her. "And I don't care about any of that," I said. "All I care about is you. Not the years. Not the scars. Just you." For a moment, she just stared at me, as if trying to memorize my face, trying to believe I could mean it. Then she laughed softly, brokenly, shaking her head. "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is," I whispered. The tension eased between us, not gone, but shifting, softening. She turned her hand over beneath mine, letting our fingers intertwine. It was such a small gesture, but it felt like the answer I'd been waiting for. "I'm scared," she admitted finally. The words were fragile, like glass. "I know," I said. "So am I. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." Her breath caught, and tears finally slipped free, though she smiled through them. She squeezed my hand tighter, then rose slowly from her chair. Without a word, she moved around the table and stood beside me. I tilted my head up, meeting her gaze. Her hand brushed against my hair, tentative, then resting at the back of my neck. I stood, closing the space between us. This time, she didn't turn away. When her lips met mine, it wasn't hurried or desperate, it was soft, lingering, full of all the silence we had carried for so long. The world didn't fall apart, the rain didn't return, nothing dramatic happened. It was just us, finally letting ourselves feel what had been there all along. When we pulled apart, she leaned her forehead against mine, her voice barely a whisper. "Promise me something. Anything. Don't let me push you away again. Even if I try." I smiled, brushing away a tear from her cheek. "Not a chance." The morning sun spilled across us, warm and steady, and for the first time, either of us looked away. We weren't uncertain anymore. Whatever lay ahead, we had chosen it, together. 14L